Incidentally, some of you may not know this, but when it came to high altitude reconnaissance with balloons, we have one of the fathers of that sitting here, Colonel Haig, before he went into the meteorological satellite program, was running what popularly known as Moby Dick, the Genetrix program for high altitude balloon reconnaissance. So, Colonel Haig, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about the Moby Dick balloon reconnaissance program?
Sure. Back before satellites, the problem of getting information about what was happening in Russia was a very serious one. And we were having all kinds of miscellaneous stories and rumors and bad propaganda about how the Russians were way ahead of us with missile development and so forth. So some Paul Worthman and some other people who were, Paul was a meteorologist, he's a pioneer too. But anyway, he knew about the Japanese program of flying balloons over the United States with incendiaries to light fires all over our forests in the Northwest, called Furu. The Japanese Furu program was a last-ditch kind of an effort with about 400 to 500 balloons made of rice paper, reinforced with a little glycerin coating. And they carried incendiaries at the end of a very long fuse, which the fuse was lighted when the balloons were launched in Japan. And as they flew across the Pacific and the jet stream, by the time they got over the west coast, the fuse had burned out, so it started dropping incendiaries. But unfortunately for the Japanese, that happened to be a very wet year on the west coast, so they didn't start any fires. And so that whole system was a failure. But it did demonstrate that it's perfectly possible to use balloons to fly across oceans intentionally with a great deal of success. Of the Japanese launch of somewhere between 400 and 500 balloons, they believe that between 350 and 380 balloons actually made it across and could have caused havoc had it been a dry year. Anyway, Paul decided that what we should do is to follow their example, use some improved balloons and fly them across, launch them in Europe, fly them across Russia with cameras to take pictures as they went across. And that was Project Genetrix birth. You had to have somebody to develop the balloons, and that's the job I got. So we had at that time two sources: Raven Industries, a couple of young people, and General Mills, the breakfast food people. A guy named Charlie Moore had started a research program, and he was first of all researching polyethylene as a packaging material, and then he gradually went into balloons when they were requested by a few scientists to make some balloons for weather studies. So he started out to make balloons for Genetrix, and Winds and Industries was the third one who started up then, so we had three sources. They developed balloons that were designed to fly at 45, 55, and 65,000 feet, depending on the different size of the balloon. At 65,000 feet, the balloon was 72 feet in diameter, had about 3/4 of an acre of polyethylene in it, and was an absolute bitch to put together. Imagine heat sealing with great success and not leaving any holes when you're trying to heat seal the edges of 1.5 mil. That's 1.5 thousandths thick polyethylene, the full length of a balloon that's 114 feet long, stretched out. Well, they found out how to do it. We made some really excellent balloons. I tested them by flying in a couple of them. Had some really interesting flights up to about 10,000, 15,000 feet. In those balloons, we modified the balloon slightly to provide an escape hatch on top, put a gondola on the bottom instead of a payload package, and take off. And it was a lot of fun. I always figured if you couldn't have fun on a program, there was something wrong. So we had a lot of fun. Anyway, Moby Dick ended up flying some 700 balloons from the three launch sites at Astoria, Oregon, Tillamook, Oregon, and Marsh Field on the West Coast. And they carried various packages, but mostly they carried a package we were developing in order to carry a camera operated by a little automobile battery in it and a whole bunch of very carefully designed insulating material to keep the film from becoming cold and stiff in the camera for a period of 8 days. And that was developed by Tufts University, and a little group from the physics department there. It was an excellent package, really worked. We flew the same camera, but incidentally, with slight modifications, was used in Corona, exactly the same camera, slightly different lens on it. And they developed the mechanism for the whole process of recovering the package from the balloon. A young captain named Fruget was in charge of that part of the program. He finally trained some 14 air crews to fly C-124s, later C-130s, but mostly C-124s then, flying boxcars. They put booms out the back end of these things, put a cable between them with grappling hooks on it, and the pilot is supposed to fly directly at a descending parachute with a 150-pound payload package on it, time his flight so that he just passes over the top of the parachute. He has a total of 24 feet allowance between the bottom of his airplane and the top of the parachute. So he has to be within 24 feet when he passes over for the hooks to grab the parachute and pull the package aboard. I'll tell you, it took very brave pilots quite a while to master the technique. It is contrary to normal human judgment to fly your airplane directly at a descending package, knowing that if you misjudge and you hit it, that package will come up and smash into your airplane and probably bring you down. So but believe it or not, they got so they would get 11 out of 12 packages, every one of those 16 pilots and crews. So that's what we had on the East Coast, flew 700 balloons across the country, and incidentally started the whole UFO craze. These balloons at sunset and sunrise, while the ground is dark, the balloon is still illuminated by the sun, and it's a very bright light. And so in people's eyes with various kinds of astigmatism and other things, saw that in every conceivable different way. And so we found we could track our balloons pretty well by television reports of UFOs. We tried desperately to put out information. These were weather balloons, but nobody wanted to believe that. And there was a notice to pilots, do not under any conditions try to catch one of these balloons. It's flying above your flight altitude, you can't reach them anyway, so don't go. Well, in West Virginia, an Air National Guard pilot flying the first jets that had been given to the Air National Guard stood one of his airplanes on its tail to chase a balloon going by at 72,000 feet. His ceiling is about 50,000 feet, or less, around 45,000. So he flamed out and made a great big hole in the ground, and that was the end of him. So the Air Force put out a notum, I think in red ink, I don't know. A very insistent one. Next pilot tries to catch a balloon is going to get court-martialed. And so that's put an end to that. But that was the only fatality that our balloons caused that I know of among people. We were launching out of Tillamook one time, and if you know anything about Oregon, that's great cow grassland, pasture country. And then one of our packages from a balloon where we were experimenting with different kinds of lifting gas, package did not lift well, it was raining, so it didn't come up and it dragged across the ground, clobbered a cow, and that cow turned out to be the most valuable cow as the man sued the United States. So that was the only other fatality that we knew of. But the UFO was a cause of a lot of concern. In order to field this program, after we had proven the balloons and the recovery and the package and everything, the Air Force and the CIA organized the Air Communications and Resupply Command, or some such name, a pseudo CIA-run organization. And we trained the crews and those launch sites, and they took the whole program, Generatrix, over and mounted it in Europe, but they made the serious blunder of putting their launch sites up close to the border with Russia in Germany. We told them to stay at least 120 miles away from the border. Well, that's not where they had airfields, so they went to where the airfields were, and of course there were tactical forward fields about 20 to 25 miles away from the border. Launching the balloons from those places, balloons were still rising as they passed over the border, and the Russians had very little difficulty putting up fighters to shoot them down. Well, they soon discovered that shooting holes in a polyethylene balloon below the gas bubble doesn't do any good. So what they soon learned to do was use the tip of their wing to go up and rip the side out of the balloon where the gas bubble was. That brought them down right away quick. And that's when Khrushchev ended up in the UN in New York with 3 of our cameras on his desk, pounding on the table with his shoe. Most of you are too young to remember that, but they even caught it on TV. Eisenhower was at that point upset, of course, and so he canceled the program, which was too bad because it was a pretty good program. Of the some 100 balloons they actually did launch, some of which were lost to Russian aircraft, about 28 of them went all the way across Russia, and packages were recovered from 23 of the 28, and the pictures were beautiful. Had the program been mounted properly and run properly, it could have solved most of the problem of reconnaissance over Russia at that time, before satellites. One little follow-on, a couple of years after that Genitrix was canceled, a man named Dick Braun at Cambridge Research Labs, Captain Braun, very good meteorologist, theorized that the wind above 140,000 feet reversed direction for about 4 or 5 months each summer, and actually flew from the east to the west. To prove it, he flew 3 balloons that we know of over the United States, launching them on the East Coast, up Minnesota actually is where he launched them, and tracked them across and then cut them down after they had passed the West Coast. His theory was correct, so we had learned some about the atmosphere we didn't know. So anyway, Genitrix 2 was organized, or authorized, and they got control of a pocket carrier and put a crew on it to go launch a balloon, the first one out over the Pacific, going to fly across Russia. Trouble is, they ran into a rain squall, and the launch was delayed by about 8 hours. And the State Department, for some reason, had insisted that they put a timer on the package to cut the payload down at the end of a certain time period. They didn't trust the radio controls. So that timer was set by the crew to correspond to the planned launch site, which was delayed by 8 hours. When they finally did launch it then, they forgot to reset the timer. So the package cut down right on cue, directly over the Kremlin, 2 blocks away from the Kremlin, in Moscow. That was the end of Jennifer. And Eisenhower was probably the most furious president we've ever had. He was very upset. But that's the end story of Moby Dick, the name that was put on that balloon program for publicity purposes, because it got a little more pizzazz in the newspapers than Very High Wind Field, which is the other, Vehoff was the other name. So Moby Dick was what it was known as, and that's the Moby Dick story.
Thank you so much.